What you're looking at right now is a live image from the Israel-Gaza border. You can see that smoke rising there in the distance. Israeli troops moving deeper into Rafah ahead of that planned full-scale operation. The United Nations saying today that a UN convoy attacked in Gaza Monday was clearly marked, and its planned movements had been announced in advance to Israeli authorities. The UN saying one staff member was killed, another wounded. Want to talk about all of the latest developments here, especially over the past several hours. So let's bring in Trey Yingst with Fox News. He is live for us over in Israel with details. Hey, good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey, Josh, good morning. We were along the Israel-Gaza border overnight watching Israeli airstrikes as drones and helicopters operated overhead. There's quite a lot of activity once again in northern Gaza, in the Jabalia area. More than 220 days after the war began, Israeli ground forces are still going after Hamas cells there. Here in Tel Aviv, you might hear some music in the background. It is Independence Day, and so many Israelis are at the beach. They are off work, and they're enjoying time here in Tel Aviv. But inside Gaza, the war rages on, and vulnerable Palestinian civilians don't have that luxury. They are still sheltering in the southernmost city of Rafah. More than 450,000, according to the United Nations, have evacuated to the Mawasi humanitarian zone. And as you noted, a UN convoy was hit by reported Israeli fire, killing at least one staff member. And so the war there is very much active, and there is no end in sight, with the Qatari prime minister saying today that both the Israelis and Hamas remain far apart on any sort of ceasefire deal, and thus the fighting will continue. Josh?
And Trey, it sounds like, of course, the fighting does continue over on the northern border as well between Israel and Hezbollah. And I did want to ask you about this because we heard from Hezbollah's chief that essentially if the war does continue in Gaza, he has said that people there in northern Israel will not be able to return home anytime soon. So my question for you, does Israel, I guess, really take that into account as the war is ongoing in Gaza?
Absolutely, and there's a lot of political pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to allow the nearly 100,000 Israelis that are internally displaced from the north to return home. There is daily rocket and mortar fire along the border coming from southern Lebanon. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah remains active even today. We've seen alerts going off in the north, and it creates an environment where civilians cannot live along the border. And the Israelis have said time and again that ultimately they likely will have to implement some sort of military option to push Hezbollah back from the border. But they are still focused on the operation inside Gaza. And so they're walking a tightrope here, trying to determine where the forces will be focused, and also understanding that politically it's very unpopular that the war in Gaza continues. There are still Israeli soldiers dying. There are Israeli soldiers dying in the south and the north. And of course, as you noted, the civilian population is displaced along the border.
And Trey, at this point, do we know when that Rafah operation, the full-scale operation, will actually begin? Because it is something that we've discussed now for weeks and really months and months.
So the operation in Rafah is already underway, but it is slowly moving forward. As we noted, there are more than 450,000 Palestinians that have been told to evacuate and heeded those orders from the Israelis. That number, according to the United Nations. But this may look very similar to the initial ground invasion into Gaza in late October. The Israelis taking it in a step-by-step process that will come in stages rather than all at once. They want to try to limit the amount of civilian casualties, understanding that Israeli forces, if they do push deep into Gaza in the southernmost city of Rafah, will face fire from Hamas. And so it's an incredibly challenging equation here, and it's an equation that doesn't just involve forces on the ground, but also that American support, since President Biden did say that U.S. military aid to Israel will be contingent on how the Israelis operate in Rafah.
Great. Trey Yingst there with Fox News. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you.